When I was 9 years old, 1952, my father walked down our hall of our house. We lived on Elmwood, and he came into my bedroom and he said, "Tom, I bought a ranch in Buffalo Gap, Texas." And I did not realize how important that was for the rest of my life.
Buffalo Gap was a great little town to grow up in. Everybody knew everybody, and you couldn't get by with anybody because they'd tell on you.
But it was just a good place to raise kids.
There is a lot of heartfelt memories from growing up in Buffalo Gap.
And we moved to Abilene and we came back. We always came back to Buffalo Gap. Buffalo Gap will always be my home, always.
I think makes it special because it still has that pioneer feel of an old little village.
It's amazing. It's only a few miles from Abilene, yet it's totally different.
Well, Buffalo Gap is here because it's a great location.
Buffalo Gap is about 2.4, I think, square miles, maybe 2.5 square miles large.
See, Buffalo Gap in the 1860s and 1870s, they serviced the buffalo hunters.
You know, the Indians were here for years. Buffaloes would winter in this area, San Angelo from here. That's what they do. And when the grass started growing, they would migrate through here. 4 and 5 million buffalo. And they'd walk through Buffalo Gap, and when they got through Buffalo Gap, some would go to where the T&P line is, some would go to the right, some would go to the left, and some would go to Kansas. And when it got colder, they would come back and go right back down like to San Angelo. This is how it developed. So Buffalo Gap truly was Buffalo Gap. The buffalo migrated through here. And the Indians knew it, the buffalo hunters knew it, and for 500 years, 1,000, whatever it is, this was the process. And they'd do it every year, and they'd come back, and every year, and come back.
But yeah, this part of the world, just about every major Indian band that ever was in Texas, at some point, this was part of their territory. But since the Indians tended to push each other around as to what territories they had, I think most of these were probably Tonkawa, but there were also Comanche and Kiowa and just about every major band was here at some point.
They said at one time that between the gap in Buffalo Gap, which is 2.5, 3 miles wide, Tommy Clack from Abilene, Texas, which was a school teacher, said that they would come out with wagons. Now, Abilene was established at that point in the 1880 whatever. And they'd come out in wagons, and they would gather buffalo bones and take back and deposit them kind of where Frontier, Texas is. And they would take those buffalo bones and then end up over in Fort Worth, and then they used it to make bone china, and they used all kinds to work with sugar. And buffalo bones were very important. They could sell them. But she said you could walk across the gap and never get off buffalo bones.
Well, our grandfather was a child when they moved here, and he said he would always remember his first view of, quote, Buffalo Gap. And he said, I was so puzzled. He was 10 or 12, he was young. He said it looked like a house that they were moving. And he said we rode and we got closer, And he said, actually, it was a wagon with horses, and they had a load of buffalo hides. And that was what he thought was a little small cabin house, because they were, they were very, very small dwellings at that time. But he said, it was a load of buffalo hides. And he said, I just thought, wow. I thought it might have been buffalo bones. He said, no, it was hides.
Why people wanted to live out here is because you could get water, and that's always been a real problem for everybody. We've got 3 underground rivers. We've got one that kind of runs along where the creek is on this side, and there's another water flow that comes to the east of us that's underground, but that's where water runs. There's sort of a little creek area. When you're going back that direction, you'll cross a place. So those are 2 of them. And the third one, it comes down sort of in the center, and it's salt water. And it's more on the south side of Buffalo Gap.
They came here in 1885. We have some letters that my great-grandfather sent back home to my great-great-grandfather, Robert Daniel Wagstaff, and talking about this part of the country, and just talking about how high and lush the grass was, how beautiful it was here, and just how that this country was very rich, and for a person with purpose, that they could do real well in this part of the world. And so it was, and in fact, he said, I believe in the letter, that coming to this part of the Texas had far exceeded his expectations, which were fairly high to begin with.
Buffalo Gap was the first county seat in Taylor County.
John Brookerson, their first child, when he wanted to get married, there was no place to get a license, that sort of thing. The laws or a place, a courthouse or any of that sort of thing, that it didn't exist. So they had to go to the adjoining county to the south, to Coleman County, to get a marriage license. So, it was good to have, if you could have a place where you could conduct business, you could make records, you could record land, changing parties, that sort of thing, and just law. So our grandfather, Fred Brookerson Sr., and one of the Moody's that eventually went back to the Galveston, Houston area, donated the land for what's in the Buffalo Gap Historic Village, that they built a jail, and that was upstairs. Downstairs was the courthouse that served for a few years before they moved the county seat to Abilene, Texas.
So from the early history, so in the 50s, that was gone. And all those early buildings where the highway crosses at a diagonal, that was the town square. And it was completely surrounded by wood buildings. And of course, they're all gone. But Buffalo Gap was a thriving little town until Abilene came in, and after they stole the election. Now listen to me, they stole, I just want you to understand what I just said.
As we know here in this part of Taylor County, that a few years before my great-grandfather got here, the Abilenians came and took all the deed records and the court records, and ostensibly stole the county seat from Buffalo Gap and made it Abilene. And with the railroad running through Abilene, that kind of sealed that deal.
Because of the railroad coming. Because everybody gravitated to where a railroad was going to come or was rumored to come. Well, a railroad would have a little trouble traversing mesas.
I just have bits and pieces that I remember, and it was the day that they were voting what would be the county seat, and the vote to be was in Abilene. And The people from Buffalo Gap got in their wagons and they were on their way to Abilene and met a gang of people from Abilene to stop them.
Well, it doesn't look like it would be that formidable now, but with a wagon and a team, it was what was known as Mud Hill. You crossed Elm Creek and then it was up. And they've shaved that off a great deal now. When cars came along, the cars could not pull up that road.
And so I think there were about 1,200 people here at one time. And then Abilene, when the Texas and Pacific Railroad came through Abilene, they voted to make that Taylor County. And so there was kind of a little war going on. There was a lot of kind of gunplay. There was nothing really happened bad, but there were threats and you had people doing things. And when they moved the county seat from Buffalo Gap to Abilene, it was not a fun time to be here, or I've been told. But what happened was the judge that certified the election lived in Buffalo Gap. And when he certified the election that Abilene had won, instead of having gunplay or gunfire or that kind of deal, the people in Buffalo Gap went over, and I'm gonna use a bad word, but they killed all of his chickens. And they had a big fried chicken dinner. And every Sunday, I have the judge's fried chicken served, so Abilene won't forget that they stole the election.
The first Wagstaffs that were in Taylor County were my great-grandfather and his sister. They came from Tennessee. My great-grandfather, John Miles Wagstaff, had seen an ad for a teaching position at the Buffalo Gap College and decided that he wasn't sure where that was in Texas, but it was in Texas and he knew he wanted to come to Texas. So he and his younger sister hitched up the wagon, literally, and had 3 or 4 horses, and also had another family with them, a black family named the Wilkersons, who were also coming to help with the college and to work at the college along with my great-grandfather and what would be, I guess, my great-great-aunt. Her name was Mary Ella Wagstaff, and she also she taught music at the college. My great-grandfather taught Greek, Latin, geometry, and history, and started in I believe it was the fall of 1885. It may have been the spring of '86. I don't recall as we sit here, but again, my great-grandfather and his sister and this family, the Wilkersons, came here and all worked at the college. And the Buffalo Gap College was situated where the elementary school is now. In fact, until they redid it a few years ago, you could still see some of the original flat brick and shale building. It was part of the original building.
There is a story. My grandmother was in the Presbyterian College for maybe a year, and she said it was a hard college. You had to take algebra. If you were coming from Morrow to take algebra, that's going to be tough. And she had trouble with algebra. But that's what she was taking when she was there at the Presbyterian College.
Do you know about the framework that is still there?
It's still in the elementary school. There are, and the stone. In fact, we even had
Of the college.
well, they took they took the stone from, they took the stone from the college and built the school that's there now. And of course they've added to it, but the original, I know when they had added on to it, and when our granddaughter started teaching school at Buffalo Gap, and she was showing me around, you know, the new addition and all, and she patted on one of the walls as you go into the gymnasium, and she said, "Nanny, do you know what this is?" And I said, "Yes, it's the original stone from the old building. That was the wall, because it's sizable stones, because it was that red sandstone." And I know our grandparents attended school there.
Moved to Buffalo Gap on Labor Day weekend in 1939. Everything was burned up after a severe heat and drought. I remember my mother crying as we drove down Belle Plaine Road, coming to the Gap. Belle Plaine Road was just a narrow dirt road at that time. She made Dad promise to get her out of here just as soon as he could, find work somewhere else. After they settled in, they never moved. Buffalo Gap was home for them for 60 years, and they're buried in Buffalo Gap Cemetery. Buffalo Gap was a sleepy little town, even more so then than it is today.
I was born in Detroit, Michigan. My father, it was during the war. I broke out with the war, as a matter of fact. World War II we broke out at the same time. And my dad worked in a war plant in Detroit. And we had some folks come to visit. They went door to door. They were from ACC, it was Abilene Christian College back in those days in 1939 when I was born. I am 85 years old. I'll give you that as a heads up, so you won't have to ask me. And they were campaigning for Church of Christ, trying to get a church started evidently in Detroit, and they talked to my mother. My dad, of course, was not home, but they talked about Abilene, Texas, and how wonderful Texas was and what they had to offer. That just was a bee in her bonnet. My mother loved horses better than she loved anything. I mean, that was her thing, and she thought everybody in Texas rode horses all the time for everything. So we packed up and moved to Texas.
Then World War II started. Camp Barkley was opened, and nothing was ever the same again for us kids. Camp Barkley days in the early 40s, the following warrior divisions trained at Camp Barkley. Then they went to Europe, where they were all exemplary in the war against Nazi Germany. The 45th Division trained first. That was the Oklahoma National Guard. Then the 90th Division, which was the Texas and Oklahoma Division of the National Guard. And then the 12th Armored Division finished things off. All of the country northwest of Buffalo Gap was where the soldiers trained. It was supposed to be off limit to us kids, but we spent most of our time over there. They had a complete German village that they used for training. They had rifle ranges, machine gun ranges, and hand grenade ranges, and so many other wonderful things of interest to kids. The soldiers were our heroes. We couldn't stay away. We mimicked them in every way possible. We did so many dangerous things, it's a wonder some of us weren't killed or badly injured. We would go to the hand grenade range and find hand grenades that had not exploded. We would pull back the springs and stick bobby pins in the holes where the grenade pins had been. We would bring them back to the Gap and throw them off the railroad bridge, where they would explode. No one paid any attention to the noise because there were continuous noises made by men who were training to go to war. We would load bandoliers with unexploded 30 caliber and 50 caliber shells and bring them back to the Gap and play with them. We found dummy bazooka and rocket shells, bayonets, trench knives, etc., that became common everyday play toys for us.
When they started to build the base with Camp Barkley, I remember as a boy driving up this back road by the ranch with a 4x8 sign that said, "Warning, unexploded ammunition." And on that back road, you'd have 2 or 3 of those signs, which means, so all of this side of the mountain is that where they did as a training deal, but they were using live ammunition. And so, but I remember it was a white sign with black letters, and boy, it got your attention. So, one day, my older brother, Vincent, had a problem, and he was on crutches. And we were out over kind of where I live now, and he could use crutches like an extension of his arms. So if you were trying to fight with him, he'd get those crutches up there, go, wow, wow, wow. You know, and I'd grab his crutch and he'd crush my hand. And so I was always in trouble. And so I was playing and stuff, and you know, I don't know how old I was. But I looked down and I found this thing, and I said, gosh, you know, this kind of looks like a hand grenade, and if I were to saw this part off over here, I could make a hand grenade out of this. And so I said, and here's Tommy with hand grenades. I threw that over, and my father went, whoa, boy, and everybody backed up, and it was a hand grenade. Now it was a training hand grenade. But Dad, I mean, I never forget, Dad was moving everybody back, and they had Dias come out and get it, but it was a training deal. So there were things all over. You would find stuff all over. And there's probably stuff that's buried up there now that you would never believe. But it's been a long time since then. So hopefully all of it is going to have disappeared. But they had, you know, in those hills, they had kind of like a German camp built. And they were trained the soldiers how to go through this German camp like a village. And it was a village. And I've never seen it. I've heard about it. But they trained these soldiers to go through and look in the windows or whatever they were doing, but like they were in Germany. So, you know, here we are, and we've had, you know, you've had Camp Barkley. We've had camps before that. You had Fort Phantom Hill. You've had all of these military camps, Fort Chadbourne. And, you know, all of those deals were to keep the Indians out or to try to control them, which was kind of a laugh because the Indians were kind of, you know, they did whatever they wanted to do. But so you've had all this military stuff through here. And so here we are now at this time, and we've got a wonderful Air Force base, and Abilene is growing, and we're still here. And, you know, it's pretty good.
My mother would say at night, sometimes at night, our American troops would march the German soldiers down Live Oak Street from Camp Barkley. And that's how they got their exercise, was walking these soldiers. I don't remember, like I say, I don't remember that, but they make reference to seeing those German soldiers at night walking down through there.
Well, there were some POWs who escaped from Camp Barkley, and there are different stories as to the directions they went, you know, and they were headed for Mexico. They were trying to get to Mexico. And I think they captured them, or they gave up down around Winters or somewhere like that, you know. So, you know, and the funny thing about all of that was when they got back, they took them back to Camp Barkley, put them back in the POW camp over there with the other POWs. And the other POWs almost beat them to death because they made it so tough for the rest of them. Because they really had it made over there. They would they would send the POWs out to work with the farmers, you know. And I think Mr. Brookerson, Clark Brookerson, and Tony worked some of the POWs out on some of his property for a period of time, and they really, you know, the POWs really enjoyed it. Most of them were old farm boys that had gotten drafted into the German army and got captured.
And when Camp Barkley during the war was established, it was like 50,000 people. And when the war was over, Camp Barkley they shut it down. I mean, just right then. And so all of Camp Barkley, all the buildings and all the stuff, and the soldiers were gone and the war was over, it was gone. So it had to have been a huge financial blow to Abilene, Texas.
But when we moved, we kept coming out here to look at this place we were about to move to. It was just a quiet little village. But the day we packed up and moved and had a horse trailer and were moving horses, we came into Buffalo Gap and there were thousands of people in Buffalo Gap. It was Old Settlers Day. The fiddlers were playing, the food was being served, it was loud, it was a crowd. Old Settlers Day in Buffalo Gap, in my growing up years, was big, and it was fun. Lots went on. We could hear it a mile. We lived a mile out of the city, what it is today, the city, what it is today. And you could hear music up on the hill. So it was unbelievable.
It was kind of like a county fair nearly. My mother, they had a contest every year for the oldest surviving citizen in the community. And my grandparents, my grandmother, maternal grandmother, and them, they won once, a couple of times because they were oldest in the community. But the Old Settler was really great. We, like Tom said, we had a lot of fun things to do. The kids would do. I mean, we just had a great time.
But anyway,
You remember the Hollands over at Bradshaw?
I do. I remember the Hollands. Yeah.
I was Jack Holland, little boy. They came through there one day and us girls were taking a shower bath outside. And they just hollered and hooted. And so we went on to that Old Settlers reunion anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember my grandmother going to Buffalo Gap, and they were, I want to say they were in their 80s, and they were thinking that they were...
Did you ever dance?
What?
Did you ever dance? First time I ever danced was at
I can remember being there when there was a fiddler playing.
Yeah.
And
Mr. Graves from
yeah,
Guy.
yeah.
He was the best fiddler in the country.
Yeah. They had everything. Yeah, it was more of a community gathering than it was anything else. They didn't sell things. They didn't, and everybody brought food, and everybody would have a badge that had how many years they lived in Taylor County.
Old Settlers reunion. When we started coming out here in the 60s, that was a big deal, the Old Settlers reunion. And, you know, my in-laws were new at that time, new to Buffalo Gap, although they were not, I mean, they had lived in West Texas all their life. And she had actually visited this part of the country and knew that's where they wanted to retire to, was Buffalo Gap. So there would be a big parade, and when I say big, I mean it was big for a town of 300 people. It was something that people looked forward to, and I know our children went to school down the road at Wiley, and even the kids there would come out and put different things, you know, bicycles or whatever, into the parade. And then there would be speakers, there would be a dance, there would be, I mean, just fun. On Sunday they would have, I mean, it would be a weekend event, the Old Settlers reunion. And people would come, and they really honored the
elder, and they wanted to hear the stories. And so that was a fun time for all generations.
It was big. And we would have a float in the parade every year from the liquor store. And we won trophies. We had a 68 Volkswagen Bug, and we decorated it up like a monster. And my little brother was probably about 6 at the time, got inside, which was actually the trunk, but the front of the car, and he would raise it up and close it, and we had teeth on all around the trunk of the Volkswagen. He would raise it up and put it down like it was a monster opening and closing. My grandmother, Nancy Pearl McCoy Cotton, was the most wonderful lady. She never missed it. She was always at the Old Settlers Parade. And she would win for having the most kids. She had 7. But she would win for having the most kids or the oldest. Or she was always winning those big rosette ribbons and beautiful lady.
And you've got to remember the Old Settlers were really made up of old settlers. I mean, that's not just a word. They've all died now. Not all of them. I know some of my friends maybe are older than I am, but.
That started in 1922. Yeah, and it was a big thing when we moved to Buffalo Gap. And it was a big thing, actually. They kept it going until the early 2000s, and then it just got to where there just wasn't anybody to do it anymore, you know. It's one of the saddest things that I could remember that they didn't do anymore, you know, because it kept our present connected to our past. Because all the old people came back, and the young people came back, and everybody got together, and we had one big blast.
Okay, I want to tell you a little bit about the Red and White grocery store. It was on Main Street. They didn't just have groceries. They had dry goods. They had men's jeans. They buttoned up the front. And so I went in there, I'd saved my money, and I went in and I bought myself some boys' jeans. Well, I got it when I got home. You know, they had been recruited in Detroit, Michigan to be these Christian people. And the Lord says you don't wear men's apparel. So I had to embarrassingly go back with my jeans and take them back and tell them I'm sorry, my mama wouldn't let me have them. Because God didn't want me to be wearing boys' jeans. And the man that owned the Red and White grocery store was our first mayor. His name was Hendricks, C.P. Hendricks. My dad was the next one, so he was the second mayor. There were a lot of us, there were a lot of families that really wanted to incorporate Buffalo Gap, and we finally got it together in 1958. And so once we got to be incorporated, we got to do a lot of things. And so somebody decided we would have a liquor election. That was the first division that ever happened in Buffalo Gap, because there were those that were for it, and there were plenty of those that were against it. But the for-its won. And so it was really a hard time there for a while. People didn't like each other because you voted for this and you knew better. And that was the only time I can remember in history where the community had a lot of divisive stuff going on.
I'll tell you, the Church of Christ people here, the Baptist preacher, the Baptist people, at that time there was a Nazarene church, they were up in arms They said it was scandalous and ridiculous. And my mother-in-law would say, those women are going to come out here with blouses too low. They're going to be showing their breasts. They're going to be wearing short skirts. I mean, just because there was going to be liquor. So it was quite an uprising.
People weren't mad. People were tickled dead.
Yeah, that was a big thing, and everybody got a chance to buy in, buy some of that, to buy in on that 13 acres.
My dad bought some stock, and my mother was furious. She said, we can't afford that stuff, And so anyway, she really gave Dad the dickens. Well, the stock, after they opened the 11 acres, the stock started paying off. And I mean, they were getting as much per month as he had paid for the stock. And all of a sudden it became our stock, our investment.
They put in the barbecue barn, the fish house, and they had a Mexican restaurant and the steakhouse from Zentner's from San Angelo, built Zentner Steakhouse out here. And so it was a place to come for eating. And so we're still known for a good place to come to eat because of Perini's. I mean, it's an awesome place, and their cafe is an awesome cafe. The smash burgers, man, don't get started. They're addictive.
So, but we were still living at Wiley, which is about 7 or 8 miles down the road. And so on Friday and Saturday, we could not get out of our driveway for the traffic. People would be piled up, lined up, making that 7, 8, 9 mile journey out to Buffalo Gap.
And so for years, people would come down here and they'd have a beer and do whatever. And so that was just kind of the early days. Now we're here, and so we were not in what they had a place they call the 11 acres, which was wet. And we're not in it, we're here. And so the city agreed to let us do this here. Being in Buffalo Gap, Texas, I cannot tell you how important I knew as a 9-year-old boy that Buffalo Gap, the word Buffalo Gap, was really important. I'm going to tell you something. Being from Buffalo Gap now is even more so, because this is just it's just a wonderful deal for our operation. I do not want to be on a corner, excuse me, Abilene, in Abilene, Texas. To be here on a ranch and to live here and to be in Buffalo Gap with these beautiful trees and how all this stuff works with a history has been magnificent. And so that has been the third part of this operation. Tom, Lisa, Buffalo Gap. And I probably need to reverse it. It probably needs to be Buffalo Gap, Tom, Lisa, or I don't know how it works. But all of these things work to make this what it is. And when you cook, we cook for President, we've cooked for all kinds of presidents, and the president of Russia and the president of China and all. Think about this, from Buffalo Gap, Texas, we were sent to Russia to cook for Putin. All of these things happen right here. So it's just been all of what we've done has been, I think, a wonderful lifestyle.
We'd come down every Sunday, and our children were, like I said, we lived on Buffalo Gap Road, and so we would come out after church on Sunday, and our children thought we were going on a long journey, and it was just like 7 miles from the house. But it was such a quaint little community. Our children loved running and playing, and they'd bring their bikes out. It was real safe, and it's still a safe community.
Well, it still had to be in the maybe 60s, I don't know. Nancy Rico, or Nancy Henderson now, Her dad, Harry Cole, ran the Dairyland restaurant right there on the curve where Aaron Watson's parents live right now.
So we built this place, and my dad built a barbecue. First of all, he built just a little square building, and it was called the Dairy Barn. And we had a machine that would do 2 flavors of ice cream. It had 2 barrels to it, so of soft serve ice cream, and we did hot dogs and hamburgers. And so this is my punishment for growing older. I was now a freshman in high school when he did that, and that was to keep me busy. But Buffalo Gap was a wonderful place to grow up. I had a beautiful childhood, made so many good friends, enjoy living here now. Some people we've known all of our lives. It's just absolutely wonderful. I just feel so blessed by being in Buffalo Gap. And the historic village has done so much now to kind of continue sharing things that have happened in the past so that it lives on no matter what.
I lived right down the road from the museum, and when Ernie had the museum, I forgot his last name, but when Ernie had the museum, and we used to go down there and play inside the museum. And he would take us out, and he showed us where the cannonball was stuck in the side of the building, and there was a donkey, a mule, out front, and we'd sit on that donkey and we'd play around. I mean, that was our playground. And I can't tell you the number of times I rode my horse around it, my Shetland pony.
Ernie was there then. Matter of fact, even before Ernie, we always ran around the jail. We'd go up the stairs and look and see that top rafter where the rope burns were, where they hung their prisoners. And then after Ernie took over, we didn't go in there much because you had to pay, and of course we didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't go. But we did spend some time there before Ernie took over.
No, we bought it from the Matthews. Ernie Wilson had it, and then the Matthews got it from Ernie Wilson, and then we bought it from the Matthews family. We came to Abilene in 1950. My husband opened his medical practice, and several years later we bought a ranch outside of Buffalo Gap. And going back and forth through Buffalo Gap, we could see the old courthouse, which was the first courthouse of Taylor County. And we heard they were going to tear it down, and we hated to think about that. So we ended up buying it. And we had a lot of help from the Abilene Chamber of Commerce. Kay Irby was there at that time, and she arranged for busloads of cars of tourists. We used to have a lot of those buses and they would come from areas around here, and most of the time they were mystery trips for the people. And then we also had lots of school buses here in Abilene in the area, and my husband would, every time we had a load, he would go out and talk with them and let them know what we had to offer.
So we have enjoyed the historical village so much. When we first came out here, my children would go over there and play, and you could just walk in there, and Dr. Rhodey was there. He would be working on the little buildings. Ernie Wilson is the one that actually bought the property, I think in 1956, and he bought the jail, and then Dr. Rhodey just took a liking to wanting to build up that museum, and then he did the whole village. So we got to see Dr. Rhodey over there on Sundays, and he was a wonderful physician in town, but he devoted a lot of his time to the village. Had it not been for Dr. Rhodey, we would not have the historical village.
Raising kids here, our parents never, ever worried about us. We'd go and tell them, I said, Mom, we're going down on the creek. We're going to go hunting, and we'll be back tomorrow. And we were like 13, 14 years old. We had our dogs, our coon dogs, and we'd go coon hunting and stay on the creek. Nobody worried about us. Nobody bothered us.
Hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, and so the women were a lot of times the backbone of Buffalo Gap and the movement, and they were some of the first firemen. We had an all-women's fire department in the early 80s, and then that same group of women, now the fire chief was the mayor, Mr. Johnson, and he was 100 years old.
Buffalo Gap is a small, quiet Texas community. There are 2 filling stations, a multi-purpose grocery store, and a couple of restaurants and bars. Not too different from any other town, except for one thing.
Fire department. Connie, Mary, there's a fire at Rice Singers. Okay, there's a fire right across from DC Rice Singers.
In this town, all the fires are fought by a dedicated group of women who themselves organized and now compose the Buffalo Gap Volunteer Fire Department. Their services are much needed here in this community, where all the men work out of town, and the nearest fire department is way out in Abilene. We arrive for their once-a-month fire drill. To keep sharp at least every 4 weeks when the call comes in, the women rush to the firehouse from all over town, and the drill begins. While the ladies dress for the simulated fire, we talk to their fire chief, Glenn Johnson, who's also the mayor of Buffalo Gap and used to be the only trained firefighter in town.
They first kicked me up about it. I thought they were kidding. And then they came back again, and I thought they was crazy. Then trying to organize all the women's fire department. Well, finally, about the 3rd time, they could just they want to try it. I said, well, if you want to try it, go ahead. I didn't think it lasted but 1 shot.
But these women do take their commitment seriously.
But when the telephone rings on the fire department, it doesn't matter if you're bone tired. It doesn't matter if fire terrifies you, which it does me. You just know that there is something that you need to do, and you drop what you're doing, and you go do the best you can.
Take it easy now. Swing it to the right. To the right. Now swing it like you was going to go upstairs with it.
I think that all of us have a certain amount of self-pride now. I mean, I think we're capable, and we know we're capable. It makes you feel good.
Hope the beauty shop's open this afternoon.
But before these firefighters could get to the beauty shop, we went back to the firehouse and talked to them about what it was like when they first started their training.
That poor mayor. We didn't know a 2-inch hose from a red line. We didn't know how to get on the truck. We didn't know how to start the truck or anything. And he would come and explain it and explain it and explain it. And the next night, we'd do the same thing over again.
And the first time we got dirty, I thought, you know, we may not stick to this very long. But it hasn't been that bad.
The first time we rode on the back of the truck, and Mayor let us open the sirens and turn the lights on. Oh, we all felt like kids. All of us were just giggling and bubbling and carrying on. We felt like a bunch of kids, and I don't know why they want to do it.
It's been fantastic. It's been a lot more fun than I thought it would be. It's also been a lot more work than I thought it would be. It's hard for me lifting the white hoses because I don't have a lot of strength in my hands. But I do know that there's Fritzy there and Shirley, and they're going to help.
The fireman's bride, the fireman's bride, won't sit home by her fireside.
I think they're one of the greatest fire departments I've ever seen.
And if my beauty shop come on fire, I'd call them.
I think it's really great. because none of the men are here in the daytime except for the elders, and we really do need a fire department.
From all accounts, she'd rather bounce, not the fireman's bride.
I plan on hanging in there until I get so old that I can't fight fires anymore, then I'll quit.
Hope the beauty shop's open this afternoon.
My mother was on it. And as a matter of fact, in the video they did for the Real People show, my mother was the one that did the most talking. She was the one that was in Stewart's Grocery. She was working at Stewart's Grocery at the time.
I worked for Mr. Stewart for a long time there at the store on the Saturdays and Sundays. I'd go down there and help pay for our groceries, and I'd change oil on cars and pump gas and do anything I could to help make some money.
You know, coming out of school, your favorite thing was to go get a bottle of Dr. Pepper at the Stewart's grocery store and a candy bar. You know, it was the highlight of after school.
Dora May, lovely lady, wonderful lady, loved her, and she loved us kids. One time when I was going to the store, I got stung on my little finger by a yellow jacket. And I went down there and I told Mrs. Stewart that I got stung, and she doctored my finger and took care of me, and she put alcohol on it and fixed it all up and sent me on my way. And she took, I mean, everybody out here took care of the kids. They were all awesome people out here.
I'm Lou Ellen Gates, and I'm speaking on behalf of Mabel Louise Murphy Reynolds. Used to be the oldest living woman in Abilene, but she just recently passed away in January of this year at the age of 107. Her main contribution is her bluebonnet starting seeding at the Buffalo Gap Cemetery. That came from 3 little plants that she got from a friend down in Winters. She planted them at her property in Buffalo Gap, and when those bloomed and produced seeds, she'd gather them up. Did this for a couple of years until she was able to spread the seeds out at Buffalo Gap. She told me stories of when Forrest would drive his pickup through the cemetery, and as he drove it through, she would sit on the tailgate and just scatter the seeds and just throw them out. And I asked her, didn't you rake them or anything? No, you don't do that. You just throw them out in the fall and you pray for rain. And she said if the rains came in November, but especially December and January, then the bluebonnets will be huge in the spring. We're fortunate enough this year to get them, so we're hoping for a great bluebonnet crop at the cemetery.
It is a sweet cemetery. It's very country. It is very country. But I would love for people to go up and see it, because it's a type of thing that you can go up there and sit on that wall, especially in the evening. And the sun, and when the sun comes through and hits that stained glass window, the chapel looks like it's on fire, only for about a minute, but it is magnificent.
One of the things that we learned is that horses really can make a difference in a child. And when my sister retired, she came to me and she said, you know, we've always talked about trying to have a school or have something that we're working with kids with special needs. And I think it's time. And I said, you waited till I'm this old? You know, I'd been retired for quite a bit of time and I'm no spring chicken. She said, it's not too late. And so we started Camp Able, and we started it at our home place where we used the horses we had and we learned as much as we could. And my sister decided, well, you know, there's a certification for this, so we got to get it. And I said, well, why don't you get it? Because I'm really too old to go back to school and not be able to live but a year with it. So you go get the thing. You're going to live longer than me. You're 12 years younger than I am. So she went and got her certification, but I said, I'll help you. It's a family thing. We started a little Camp Able at Buffalo Gap. But you know, if I hadn't moved to Buffalo Gap, it would have never happened.
I like small town. I'm not a city girl. I And I liked small town values. And as that I mean, you know, people have values, people have morals, they still care about one another. When it says community, community helps each other.
And my son, that's one of the reasons they moved back out here. They wanted to raise their kids in a small community.
Abilene can grow and Buffalo Gap can stay a village.
If you're here to visit Buffalo Gap, enjoy your time here, you're going to find a lot of friendly people and a lot of history.